Good afternoon, members. We've passed 4:30 and we have formed a quorum, so I call to order this meeting, which is the Bills Committee on Stamp Duty Amendment Bill 2012. This is the first meeting in 2014, so I'll invite the administration in. And meanwhile, I'd like to declare interest. I own properties. I am an accountant by profession, and the company that I'm working for provides tax advice, including stamp duty, etc. But I'm not involved in this area of work. Mr. Andrew Leung, I declare the interest as I did before, and Mr. Poon Siu Ping and Mr. Tommy Zhang, I make the same declaration as before. Dr. Kenneth Leung, I would like to repeat the declaration I made before. Mr. Yu Si Wing, the same declaration as before. Mr. James To, all right, the same declaration as before. I have no alternative. I've been asked by the Secretariat to take the lead in declaring interest as chair of the meeting. Now, we haven't finished the clause-by-clause examination since the last meeting, so may I suggest we resume the clause-by-clause scrutiny first. Starting from clause 16, we can resume the scrutiny starting from the blue bill, that is C1436 or page 58 of the marked up copy. So would members please refer to the pages I mentioned.
Agnes， 如果你準備好，請你繼續啦。
好，多謝主席。
Agnes, if you're ready, starting from clause 16, I'd like to talk about the Islamic bond in clause 15. That's the CSA, the administration's CSA. That's the CSA already submitted. So this is the second marked up copy prepared by the Secretariat, 0021. That's CB bracket 1, 15/1314 bracket 02. That's the thinner one. This is one of the CSAs proposed by the administration earlier. 47F, that is to amend section 47 in relation to eligible transaction. This is just a incidental amendment, and during the first reading of this bill, at the same time, the stamp duty miscellaneous alternative bonds bill 2013 was also tabled for the first reading, and the bill was passed in July last year. And when the bill was prepared, because of Islamic law, the comparing to traditional bonds, a different approach had to be taken. So in order to comply with the Islamic law, another tax regime has to be, or stamp duty regime has to be formulated, and there will be a relief for eligible investments, so that for the stamp duty, the ad valorem duty, and the buyer stamp duty will be relieved. It was read in the Council for the first time on the same day. But back then, that bill had yet to be passed. So when the Bills Committee scrutinizing the bill on Islamic bonds completed their work, we would like to make the corresponding amendments to include the relevant arrangements here, so that in relation to Islamic bonds, the relevant stamp duty exemptions could be granted to eligible transactions. And we would like to add 11C in relation to the bias stamp duty. This is just the incidental amendment. So any questions from members? So in short, for Islamic bonds, the eligible bonds, is it the case that they would not be exempted from these stamp duties? If they're eligible transactions, they will get the exemption. I will defer to the colleagues to take this question. Under eligible, for eligible investments, the bond issuer and will have transactions in order to comply with the Islamic doctrine. And this is solely for this purpose. If asset transfers are involved, stamp duties might be involved. And that bill in 2013 was tabled in relation to the transfer of assets and the stamp duty attracted thereby in compliance with the Islamic law. So for these transactions or transfer, the bias stamp duty would be exempted. Yes, please go on. Next, coming back to clause 16 of the bill, that is to add 63A to amend Schedule 1. That is, the Financial Secretary can, by publishing a notice in the Gazette, to amend the amend Schedule 1, so that negative vetting can be adopted to amend the additional special stamp duty and the bias stamp duty rates, so that these rates can be adjusted in a timely manner, and if necessary, the rate can be adjusted downward to 0. Mr. James To. Madam Chair, myself and the Democratic Party will oppose this 63A. Now, originally, we were supposed to amend the law, but now we only amend the schedule or the subsidiary legislation. And in order to monitor such amendments, the Council will adopt the split voting system. That is to say, as long as 35 out of the 70 members of this Council vote for the proposal, with majority support, the administration can circumvent the legislative control. So, as long as there is a group of 18 members voting for it, they can override the objection from the remaining 52 members. And the amendment could be either an upward or downward one. So, in relation to checks and balances, I see that there is an imbalance. I don't know if the administration would consider it. This is just an example. Even if the administration would not like to go through the first, second, and third reading and would like to expedite matters, a positive vetting approach should be adopted so that you get majority support of members of this Council to your amendment. Otherwise, if the mechanism in 63A is to be adopted, the administration can override the majority wish of the Council. So if the administration insists that 63A be included, we are going to oppose the bill because we see that there is huge importance in maintaining checks and balances between the legislature and the administration. We find this totally unacceptable if this is ignored. Any response? This one? I understand Mr. To's concern, but as explained before, we have no intention of undermining LegCo's powers. If we are to implement such so-called harsh measures, this is only due to a practical need, and we would like to make adjustments in a timely manner. And in terms of negative vetting, we can do things more expeditiously. And even if negative vetting is adopted, things would go back to Council for approval ultimately. Unless amendments are necessary, Secretary already promised in this Council that he will be reporting back to the Council every year on our progress. So members will have a good idea of what our work involves. Now, the shortcomings of positive vetting is, in fact, we need to get the bill passed first, and as the Law Society puts it, there are other parties involved and there are uncertainties. And if we are to introduce stamp duty control measures to stabilize the property market, this is not a good thing if we have uncertainties. That is why, having considered the issue, we considered the negative vetting a proper balance. We do not want to circumvent the monitoring of LegCo and set such make such proposals. In the end, we have this approval from the Council, whether whether the administration's proposal will be approved.
Yeah.
Well, so my question is, do you consider introducing the amendment or not? Because if 18 votes can override the votes of the remaining 51 or 52, then in the end, whether or not this is going to be included in the third reading, then the DP will be voting against the entire bill altogether, because this is totally imbalanced. This is totally lopsided. So please give it further thoughts. If you think that, all right, so long as I can have enough votes, that's okay. All right, then it doesn't matter. Then we'll be voting against it in the third reading debate. We have already told you in advance. This is not the first time that we have told you. So please think about it, and please also do the counts. And if you think that the DP's votes are not important, that's okay. Because with regard to the balance of power between the executive and the legislature, we believe that this is the overriding concern, and it overrides all the other policy considerations. All right, with regard to this amendment, so are you going to propose this amendment or not? I hope that this is going to be your last reply, instead of telling us that you need a bit further time to consider it. Well, I think our stance is that we should go for negative vetting, and that is to move the amendment to change the rate of tax by negative vetting. Mr. Abraham Sheck. Chairman, I fully agree with what Mr. James Stowe just said, Madam Chair. It's not about the cooling measures. So whatever you do to change it, well, you might not have had the intention of undermining the power of this Council, yet the actual effect is that in doing so, you'll be dealing a blow to this Council's ability to monitor the administration, and positive vetting should not have been used that way. No, it should be negative vetting. Sorry about it. So in doing so, I think you're actually dealing a very severe blow to the rule of law in Hong Kong. Yes, you might have done so with good intentions. All right, Ms. Wong, we understand that you're just doing your job, but then in doing so, you're actually undermining the whole institutional setup in Hong Kong, and our future generations would also not think that this is a good thing. That's why we have to uphold a system, we have to make sure that it remains intact. It's not just about the cooling measures to cool down the property market, and therefore we have to uphold these measures. And if we just support you because of that, then our councillors would also have to be responsible to history. And even our chief executive said that he would also want to be accountable in history. So that's point number one. And number two, you said that this is not about principles, but then, but that's your ex. So actions speak louder than voice. So I would agree with what Mr. To just said. All right, have you got anything to add in respect of the views that have been expressed? I think under the present approach, there are two approaches. One, positive vetting, second, negative vetting. So this, we have not invented anything new on this occasion. We have already set out the reasons why we would like to resort to negative vetting rather than positive vetting on this occasion. It's not that we have deliberately introduced something new on this occasion. We have not invented a new approach to change the future tax rate. In fact, we have already got these two approaches, positive and negative vetting, in amending subsidiary legislation. Thank you. Mr. Tommy Cheung. Madam Chair, I would not be as eloquent as Mr. Abraham Sheikh in the new year, but then I share the view of Mr. James To. In fact, both in this council and on other occasions, we have also seen similar things like the infant formula ban. So I would be rather agitated whenever I see this. So whenever that you table anything for negative vetting, I think that should be the exception rather than the rule. Unless you have no alternative but to resort to this, I would not be prepared to support it. Well, whether or not it's going to be passed in a third reading, both Tommy Cheung and the Liberal Party will be against it, but then I wish you good luck if you insist on that. I'm not trying to employ the delaying tactic. Just now I heard the Deputy Secretary's reply. She was rather wishy-washy. I don't know if Mr. James To is prepared to accept it. So you might just be saying that, okay, I've already got enough counts of enough votes, so whether you like it or not, I will be going to this council for a vote. So I don't know whether or not you're going to change your mind later. I'm not trying to stand in the way of this bill, but then I wish you good luck. I hope that you can insist on your stance, and our votes will definitely be against it. Any further comment? I've already set it out very clearly. The way I did it, I was trying to explain why we proposed this approach, and of course we hope that members will support us. Thank you. Madam Chair, well, you don't have to waste our time in explaining. Well, the administration is always doing this. I've been here for more than 10 years now. So long as you have counted enough votes, then you would be prepared to give us a very distorted logic, and then you will try to scare them. All right, you will have to support these cooling measures. All right, James To, please do not vote against it because we are short of your votes, and we have to pass it anyway. And you can just leave the chambers when the vote is put, when the motion is put to the vote. So you have to do it, and you have no alternative. So we have seen enough of this. We are very used to this. So I think this is just a waste of time. Mr. Chen Kem Lam. Madam Chair, first of all, I'd like to declare interest. I own property. And just now, Abraham Sheikh. Well, Mr. Abraham Sheikh, that he would have to be responsible to history and to our future generations. Whenever I hear remarks like these, I would be rather nervous about it. So can you tell us more clearly? In fact, I think Section 63 is not a big deal, because for anything that has to do with tax, we would always go for negative vetting. So it's nothing, it's no big deal. So whether it's by way of positive vetting or negative vetting, the effect is the same. So I don't think that if you go for negative vetting, well, we will have to have split voting, and then half of the members in a particular group will be able to stand in the way of the majority of this council. But then if somebody prefers to put it that way, then I cannot do anything about it. So many people are not clear about this. In particular, for the average citizen watching the live broadcast, they might not know it very well. So what's the consequence? If we resort to negative vetting, does it mean that the entire bill would be rendered ineffective, so much so that the cooling measures will no longer be effective? Well, as a veteran member in this council, I don't think is a big deal. But then please do give us a clearer explanation. Thank you. Deputy Secretary. Thank you, Madam Chair. I think I've roughly gone through that. Well, let me repeat that again. Well, by resorting to negative vetting, in fact, the merits are, as I said, well, that will come into effect right away, assuming that, well, as Mr. Chen just said, well, for all things involving tax, they will have to come into immediate effect, because we don't want to have anybody who would be able to take advantage of this. For example, it can go up or it can come down, and if it comes into effect right away, in other words, the buyer stamp duty can be reduced right away, and for people who aspire to buy property, they would like to realize this as soon as possible. All right, for whatever reason, if we have to increase it, so if it has to go up, then if it's a tax measure, then if it's not adjusted immediately, then from the time of the announcement to the time when it comes into effect by way of positive vetting, then there will be an uncertainty. There will be a period of time where things are not certain. Then people might be rushing into certain decisions, and therefore the speculation situation might worsen. And as a result, we might not be able to achieve the objective of making a timely adjustment to the market. So that's the situation today, because we have to do it by way of legislation. That's why, after the announcement has been made, we have not been able to charge anything. So we have to note down everything. And according to the Bar Association, given the uncertainty, it has also expressed its concern, because for anything that has to do with tax, it would like to see things spelled out more clearly. And also, if we have to make any adjustment, and if the circumstances warrant immediate, prompt, and quick action, then positive vetting, yes, on the face of it, well, members might have shorter time to scrutinize it, but then we would be able to focus on what needs to be scrutinized, so that we'll be able to make an early decision. And of course, if members want to vote against it, then they also have the absolute power to do so. That's why we have no intention whatsoever to undermine the powers of councillors. But then in doing so, when it comes to cooling measures like these, that's because the market does have a genuine need, and when we do it, we would like to do it promptly and immediately, or else we would not be able to achieve the desired effect. I hope that this piece of information will be able to allay your concerns. All right, we have two more members who would like to ask in the second round. Please do not repeat the points that have been made. So we'll give you a chance to speak in the second round. 3 minutes, Mr. Abraham Sheck. Madam Chair, I'd like to ask the administration, well, for the cooling measures in the form of a special stamp duty, all right, for cigarette duty, yes, you will have to increase it right away. I can understand it. But then on this occasion, you're talking about the special stamp duty. And you're trying to do this to prevent people from speculating on property. It's not for the purpose of getting more revenue. So you're actually confusing two concepts. So when you answer my question, I remember you said a lot of things about this. But then for this SSD, so is this an emergency tax, or is it a special measure in the light of a special situation? In the sense that you're trying to preempt something from happening. That is speculation. So can you answer this question? Yes, Deputy Secretary. I think you've already said it many times. Yes, indeed. So, Deputy Secretary, over to you, please. Yes, Madam Chair. Well, increasing revenue is not the purpose. But then this is just a means to achieve an end. That is to stabilize the property market. And also, well, in terms of the BSD, other than stabilizing the property market, we would also like to give the priority to Hong Kong permanent residents. And also to answer Mr. Abraham Sheck's question, yes, this is just a means. This is not for the purpose of increasing tax revenue. In fact, behind this, the purpose is to make sure that in the light of the circumstances, we'll be able to act promptly. So if we have to announce an increase or a reduction in the tax rate, then we would like to do it right away and immediately, so that there would not be any uncertainty in between as to when it's going to come into effect, so that if people would like to speculate, they would be able to do it. So we would like to preempt this. So as a means, that has to be done in a timely manner. It has to come into effect right away. That's why we propose to do it by way of negative vetting, so that in the future, when the tax rate has to be adjusted, it can be done right away. And of course, where necessary, we can adjust it to 0. And if we were to adjust it to 0, then I think by doing that immediately, then more people will be able to benefit right away.
Madam Chair, I asked this question many times, and every time she gives the same answer. In the basic law, this is not what it says. You're mixing two things up, and there is a sense of urgency in this matter. If it's for generation of tax income, it should be done in another way. I've asked this question many times before, and she just repeats her answer. Madam Chair, well, this is the principle, but it doesn't mean that the act itself is right or wrong. Mr. James Toh, Madam Chair, about the positive vetting and negative vetting, well, the concern is not just about this bill, because under the basic law, because of the split voting system, there's a difference between positive and negative vetting, not only in terms of time. If amendment is to be proposed by a member, there must be it must be passed by the two groups of members respectively. So after 1997, in order to monitor the administration effectively, positive vetting must be adopted. This is a distorted system, and this is entrenched in basic law. Well, members and experienced members say there is no difference. Well, of course, if you only say yes to the administration every time, there is no difference. But if you oppose the administration, you see such a big difference here, because you need to get the support of the two respective groups of members. And as long as the administration can secure 18 votes, then it can then override the opposing views of the remaining majority members. So it's a flaw in the system. The administration, on many occasions, have understood the concerns of members. And that is why the administration have been adopting positive vetting in other amendment of subsidiary legislation before. However, on this important issue, if the administration is minded to secure 18 supporting votes only, this is unacceptable. Of course, this is an extreme situation. There may be 40 or 50 members opposing, and in fact, we don't know from which parties these opposing members come. So I'm asking for proper checks and balances between the administration and the council. If the administration can't get sufficient votes, of course, the administration might be doing so out of good intention and might want to do things expeditiously. But it should also bear in mind that sometimes members may not share the same views as the administration. If there are 40 or even 50 members opposing the administration's ideas, well, then something should be done. Instead of remaining status quo, any supplement from Deputy Secretary? Not for the time being, Madam Chair. Anything to supplement, legal advisor? Yes, I'd like to point out a comment has been raised on a drafting point. I wonder if the administration is considering it. Well, today, in relation to a technical drafting point, the legal advisor of the Council informed the law draftmen of the administration, and we only knew about this today, and our law draftman is at the same time considering other technical drafting points as well. So perhaps next time we will submit papers on these technical matters. Mr. James Toh, is the point raised by legal advisor a technical one? Can you tell us? Yes, please briefly tell us your view, legal advisor. It's a really technical view. The amendment here says that the financial secretary, may amend the percentage. However, different percentages apply to different time frame, as in the following clauses. But in fact, different percentage set by the administration may apply to different time frames. So my suggestion is to have a technical amendment. So yes, please consider this point. Yes, we need to consider how the wording can be amended. Yes, Mr. Toh. Madam Chair, I hope the administration would consider when you are going to respond to this point, because I am also considering, in relation to 63A, opposing 63A in relation to negative vetting. I can have two approaches. Maybe I can oppose the third reading if this clause stands part of the bill. Alternatively, between myself and other members, we will consider whether to propose an amendment to turn this into positive vetting. Well, I overlooked this point, and I even have it written out, but legal advisor just reminded me that I made a mistake, and the situation is more complicated than I thought. So in relation to the exchange on the technical drafting point you mentioned, please also inform other members so that we can get involved. And if we need to amend a CSA, we can follow the agreed draft in preparing our own CSA. Having heard the administration's explanation, I think members can form their own views. We have all put forward our arguments. We may not have been able to reach the consensus. So apart from considering the legal advisor's technical point, is the administration maintaining the same position, and it's up to members to prepare their own CSAs? Yes, I think we would like to stick to negative vetting. All right, so members, it's up to you. Mr. Eleanor, I'm sorry, we have 3 meetings going on at the same time, and this is the 3rd meeting that I'm attending. Perhaps I have missed out something said earlier. The Civic Party also has great reservations on negative vetting. Now, before the Stamp Duty Amendment Bill, all along, we followed the practice in 63. We didn't have 63A. So it's the administration telling the Council that as far as past experience in amending the percentage of stamp duty is concerned, there have been lots of problems. You can't tell me, of course, that negative vetting is the same as positive vetting. I think Deputy Secretary understands as well. And obviously, by negative vetting, the Council is put into a passive position in exercising its power to monitor the administration. This is beyond doubt. Comparing negative vetting to positive vetting, the Council will be put in passive position. So the Civic Party has to consider it. Is there such a overriding policy need to change the status quo? You have to persuade us. And if negative vetting is adopted, then there is a deadline, and unless enough support is secured in Council to scrap it, the administration will just go ahead. And there are circumstances that the administration find difficult to tackle. For example, keeping the records instead of collecting money at this stage. This is, however, not totally infeasible. So why is it that the Council's powers are compromised and put in a passive position? I'm sorry I came in late. I had 2 other meetings to attend. So, yes, please briefly respond to this point. Yes, let me repeat. This is the first time we propose to amend the SSD, and we also have the BSD, which is new. And this time we would like to adopt the negative vetting approach, because when we introduce the so-called harsh measures or cooling measures, these measures are introduced to respond to the market in instantaneous manner. So after announcing these measures in October last year, it's been a year, and the bill hasn't been passed yet, and we cannot actually collect the stamp duty. It's not just about bookkeeping by the IRD, because there are other complicated situations as well, like for property conveyancing. Transactions might happen a number of times already, and money is kept by the law firms, and once the bill is passed, money would be passed on to the IRD. And it's been a year. It's been more than a year. And if we don't have a negative vetting, these uncertainties might continue. So from the experience, we find this undesirable. That is why in this amendment exercise, we would like to take the negative vetting approach so that it can take effect immediately. Of course, if the administration is not correct in doing so, this can be voted down. But we want to see immediate effect, and the powers would not be undermined. It's either positive vetting or negative vetting in terms of passing subsidiary legislations. We have not deliberately undermined the power of the Council in monitoring us. Actually, we will report our progress to the Council on an annual basis. We welcome monitoring by members. A follow-up question. The administration has been telling us since October 2 years ago, 2012, that the measures have yielded results. So I'd like to have your response on whether this is the case, and if negative vetting is adopted on this occasion, if we vetoed the SSD within the 7 weeks' time. By negative vetting, does it mean that the IRD will issue checks? Well, by negative vetting, there will be immediate effect as far as the law is concerned. So in the interim period, if any transaction attracts stamp duty to be paid, the duty will not be collected immediately. Only when our proposal is either vetoed by the council, will the new or passed by the council, will the new rates be charged? No, well, you haven't collected the duty, right? My question is a hypothetical one. The money hasn't yet gone to the public coffers. It's still on the records only. So if the subsidiary legislation isn't passed, the law firms will release the money. I understand that this point. But is my understanding correct? If negative vetting is adopted, the stamp duty will go to public coffers, and within 7 weeks' time, if we veto the amendment, because 4 plus 3 is the deadline. So my question is whether the IRD will refund the paid duties.
Well, the answer is not correct. So let's say if we had negative vetting today, then on the day of the gazetto of the negative vetting, let's say the tax rate is X%, then that would be the rate to be used to charge stamp duty, and assuming that, well, in 7 weeks' time, if the rate is changed to Y%, then from that day onwards we'll be charging BSD at Y%. There is no question of refunding the X% because on the day of the gazetto it has already come into effect. And of course for the buyers, they are aware of this, and they will also have to consider themselves as to whether or not they would like to rush into this decision, because in the course of the scrutiny by this council, then within the 40 plus days, do they really have to go through this transaction? That's something that they will have to consider themselves. All right, thank you for your clarification. All right, I get it now. And you have already overrun on your time, so please do queue up again. Yes, Wong Kwok Heng. Madam Chair, as I was chairing another panel meeting, that's why I have just joined, and I have to declare interest. I do own property myself. Yes, Mr. Eleanor, yes, I also have to declare interest. All right, many members have already spoken on the proposal by the administration for inserting 63A for the introduction of negative vetting procedure. So I've already asked you whether or not you'd like to give it further thoughts in terms of your stance. But then you said that you would maintain your stance. So please come back again if you change your mind later. All right, with regard to the government stance now, members are now invited to consider that. Yes, Jeffrey Lam, I'd like to declare interest, and my declaration is the same as before. Ms. Anna Chiang, yes, I also like to declare interest. My interest is as before. Mr. Wong Ting Kwong, I also like to declare interest, and my interest has been declared on previous occasions. Yes, you're only required to declare interest when before you speak. All right, administration, please do think about this. Please continue. Next, clause 17 in the blue bill. So it's about the transitional provisions for stamp duty amendment ordinance 2012. And if you look at clause 17, that's because if the bill is passed, then the commencement date will be dated back to the 27th of October 2012. So that would be the date to be adopted for the commencement of the bill. And in fact, there is this transitional period from that date of Gazetto to the time of its actual passage. And for the additional stamp duty charge and also the payment period and so on. So this is a clause about this. And 70(1) is about interpretation of certain clauses or certain terms. For example, with regard to relevant instrument, it means an instrument chargeable with special stamp duty under Part 2 of the first schedule. As regards the additional stamp duty, if it's passed, then in relation to a relevant instrument, it means the difference between the amount of special stamp duty payable on the instrument before the amendment ordinance and also the amount of special stamp duty payable on the instrument on the day on which the amendment ordinance was published in the Gazette. What it means is that when this bill is passed and on the day of the Gazette within 30 days, then the parties involved will have to pay the difference of the stamp duty before and after the amendment, because it has not come into effect right now. So for the buyer stamp duty, it's being charged in accordance with the existing tax rate. So after the amendment bill is passed, then the new rate will come into effect, and there is a difference. And then after the Gazette within 30 days, the difference will have to be paid. So this is all is about. So that's point number 1. And also in the government's CSA, we have also got a new item B. So here we'd like to illustrate more clearly, that is within the 30-day period, if they fail to pay the difference between the new and the old tax rate, then the penalty will just be looking at the difference. So a fine or a penalty will be imposed on the basis of the difference. In other words, within the 30-day period, if you fail to pay the difference, then basically your fine will be calculated on the basis of the difference between the new and the old tax rates. So this is all this is about. Okay? And then 70(2) is about the payment deadline, and 3 is about the payment of special or the buyer stamp duty. That is, upon the enactment of this bill on the date of Gazetto, within 30 days, the payment will have to be made. So we are actually registering everything, and then within 30 days of the Gazetto, the payment will have to be made. Please continue. Clause 18 is about Schedule 1 as amended. 18(1), just to insert the number 29C, 29CB, CC, 29D, 29DA, and so on and so forth. So that's for the purpose of the introduction of the BSD, SSD, and so on. In fact, during the clause-by-clause examination, we have already explained the details, so we have just given the serial number to these clauses. Next, in the government CSA, and if I may refer you to the marked up copy, the thinner version, 0023, we have inserted here, that is under 47G, is about SUDOC. Well, at the time when we table this bill, we haven't got 47G because SUDOC has not been enacted. But then today, as it's been enacted, that's why we have 47G. That's why there we have to have 63A, and by negativating, and also for 70, that's the transitional provision, and we have to insert this new clause. So we have just included this clause number here. Yes, please continue. Next, bracket 3, 18(3), first schedule, and on stamp duty, we'll be adding this part 1. And because later on we're going to have part 2, because for buyer stamp duty, we only have one tax rate, but then once the amendment bill is passed, there will be 2 parts to that. And the first part is the existing mechanism. That is from 2010, 20th of November or before, all the way up to the 27th of October 2012. For residential property acquired on or after that date, we will have to make it clear, because at different times with regard to SSD, there are different tax rates. That's why for the existing one, we call that Part 1. And then under 18(4), we have added that for residential property acquired on or after the 27th of October 2012, there will be this additional tax rate. And for the additional stamp duty, that has been set up in the schedule. For example, if the residential property is disposed of within a period of 6 months, then they'll be charged 20%. And if it's between 6 and 12 months, then it's 15%. And if it's below 36 months, then 10%. So for properties being held for different periods, there'll be different tax rate. So that's in terms of the transaction of residential properties. Please move on. Next, 18(5), also in the schedule, we'd like to add conveyance on sale chargeable with buyer's stamp duty. And in the schedule, we're going to add that the tax rate is 15%, and the period within which you will have to pay that's the same. And then C, who has to pay it, and that's the transferee. So C set it out more clearly as to who should be making the payment. All right, please move on. 18(6), again, is about the schedule. Just now we talked about the transfer of property, and now in a transaction agreement, again we have parts 1 and 2. Part 1 is the existing tax rate, and Part 2 is the new tax rate, and the validity is the same. Part 1 applies to residential property acquired on or after the 20th of November 2010, but before the 27th of October 2012. And then 18(7) is about the new SSD, and the new tax rate would apply to residential property acquired on or after the 27th of October 2012. So they will have to pay the new SSD, and as I just said, well, that's the same for the transfer of property. Please continue. Next, 18(8) is about the buyer's stamp duty, and the tax rate is 15%. And then C, who has to pay this, and here is the purchaser, so it's the buyer who will be paying. All right, please continue. Next, 19. In fact, 19 says that the stamp duty specification of instruments notice, in fact, this is a corresponding amendment. That is, after the amendment, stamp duty will have to be incorporated in the notice as amended. And you will have to look at this under section 20, 1AAB, says that this is about the transfer document, and next is about the transaction agreement, or the sale and purchase agreement. All right, please continue. I think we have completed the clause-by-clause examination. All right. The administration has completed the clause-by-clause examination and explanation on the amendment bill. Any questions, legal advisor? None whatsoever. So we have completed the clause-by-clause examination then. Now coming back to the outstanding issues from the last meeting, and also the replies that we are awaiting from the administration. All right. Please turn to the documents. All right, last time, the Bills Committee already discussed most, if not all, the CSAs submitted by the administration, apart from the one proposed by Mrs. Regina Ip. Now we have received a reply from the administration. CB bracket 1 623/04. So, administration, please walk us through the paper. Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Well, last time we owe a reply to Mrs. Regina Ip's proposed CSA, because at the time we only received that shortly beforehand, and afterwards we took a very careful look into that. We understand the biggest concern of members, that is about minors, in particular type 2 minors. Would their names be used to buy property, and would that create a very big loophole in the law? So we have considered that very carefully and seriously, and as I said at previous meetings, well, there were other suggestions, for example, whether they are the custodians or guardians and so on, or trustees. Well, they themselves would also have to be permanent residents of Hong Kong before they'll be allowed to buy such properties. But then according to our legal advice, well, that would create differential treatment amongst adults, and there is a chance that we might be criticized for being discriminatory. That's why it's not acceptable. But then we have also considered Mrs. Regina Ip's views very seriously. That is, Mrs. Ip is suggesting that all adults should not be granted that exemption. But then from the legal perspective, in other words, all the minors would be treated equally. In other words, the exemptions would not be granted to minors, and all minors would not be able to enjoy that exemption. And from the discrimination angle, that would be easier to defend. I don't know how to say this in Chinese. And bearing in mind the remarks by members at the meeting, that is, for minors in terms of their financial capability, in most cases they will have to rely on their parents or guardians, and in most cases they will also have to live together with their parents or guardians, and for themselves to buy their own homes, the needs should be rather low, if at all necessary. That's why the purpose of the exemption is that we understand that for some HKPL, in the current circumstances, they will have to buy their own homes for their own use. That's why from this principle and also policy, we believe that that is acceptable. That's why after considering that very seriously, on top of that, this is also to tighten up the exemption arrangement under the BSD mechanism, and in terms of the effect and also the policy issue, that will also render it more effective. That's why we believe that this is acceptable, and therefore the administration will be moving a CSA, and that's our formal response. Thank you.
Right, so the administration will accept Regina Yip's amendment. Mr. Abraham Sheck. Madam Chair, having heard the Deputy Secretary, I feel that the administration has carefully considered Mrs. Regina Yip's CSA, whereas for other members' CSAs, the administration hasn't considered thoroughly. Well, you are a member of the EXCO, Madam Chair, and I just took on board your view and draft the CSA. However, although both of you are EXCO members, she hasn't, or the administration hasn't considered your idea seriously. So it's unfair. The administration should bear in mind that everyone is equal before the law. We should not deprive anyone of their rights. That's the administration's position. As long as someone has the right of abode in Hong Kong, their rights should not be deprived of. But now in this paper, it says that according to the law, this is feasible. And what kind of administration is that? How can this position change all of a sudden? Minors below the age of 18 are forbidden to buy their own homes. Well, they do have this right under the basic law. And, Madam Chair, in fact, the focus has been on type 2 children. And Mrs. Yip isn't here. She, in fact, is taking a broad brush approach to ban everyone, so that no exemption will be given to local minors and parents of local minors. So it's just like our Secretary for Education. School children and local school children in the North District suffer as well. So I just don't know why the administration's policy can change all of a sudden. And in the question and answer session, Mr. C.Y. Leung said that nothing, not a single word should be changed, or the harsh measures effect would be undermined. However, this two-member party led by Mrs. Regina Yip made a suggestion, and the administration accepted her suggestion on careful consideration. I can't accept this administration at all. The administration changes its policies and its position any way they like. And I hope Mr. Joshua Wong of Scholarism would file a judicial review, because this suggestion would take away the right of children below the age of 18 to buy their own homes, as stated in the Basic Law. Any response, Ms. Wong? Well, in fact, we're tightening the arrangements as far as the policy is concerned. Originally, we proposed an exemption. Originally, our policy intent is to grant exemption to cater for local people's housing needs, despite market fluctuations. Now we're tightening up this policy in removing the exemption for minors. And in fact, previously, during the several meetings of this Bills Committee, quite a number of members expressed concerns over whether this would be a great loophole, and we considered all the views before we decided to accept Mrs. Yip's suggestion. Yes, I'll give you some more time to make your comment and share with us your feelings, Mr. Check. So, yes, has your answer completed? Well, the policy should not change. Any Hong Kong permanent resident should have the right to acquire properties, and now the administration says the position hasn't changed. What kind of nonsense is that? You have in fact tightened up the rule, but in fact everyone is equal before the law. Article 105 stipulates every Hong Kong permanent resident has the right to buy properties in Hong Kong, and we have been criticizing you for the ambiguity here. And now you have shifted your position, which shows that you have no principle at all. All right, Mr. Shek, your point is noted. Please do stay behind, Mr. Shek. This has to do with you. The administration has responded to all CSAs proposed by members, and the Bills Committee made the decision last time. In relation to Mr. Abraham Shek, Dr. Kenneth Leung, and Mr. Tommy Cheung, and Mr. James Toh, the Bills Committee will propose the CSAs on their behalf. And according to the handbook for the chairman of Bills Committee, 2.22 says that if the chair is against the proposed CSA, the members of the Bills Committee should consider whether the deputy chairman or other members supporting the CSAs should move the relevant CSAs on behalf of the Bills Committee. Well, my position is that I don't support the CSAs, and I can, and according to the rules of the Bills Committee, and as the deputy chairman also rejects the idea of moving the CSAs on the Bills Committee's behalf, I have to invite the members supporting the CSAs to move such amendments. So, subject to any other views, I will invite the individual members proposing the CSAs to move their respective amendments. Well, Madam Chair, I have been a member for 4 terms, and you are an EXCO member, and this is an exceptional situation. But you also have responsibility as chair. Well, you can't exercise the power as chair of the Bills Committee and stop me from speaking, and yet not exercising your power in another aspect as chairman. This is just a minimum requirement, and that is the way you handle things. You are an EXCO member. You are supposed to at least fulfill the minimum requirement. Thank you, members, for your cooperation, and I did look at the rules of procedures for Bills Committee and for the country parks designated amendment orders subcommittee. There we saw a similar situation. Ms. Sitho was the chair, and she had her own views, and that's why the amendment was moved by Mr. Lau Wong-Fat instead of chair of that subcommittee. So we do have a precedent. I ask for members' understanding. Mr. James Tien. Now, Madam Chair, you cited Ms. Sitho as chair of the subcommittee, which is a recent example. In the past, we do have other cases in which the chair moved the CSAs on behalf of the Bills Committee, followed by some of her personal remarks. Now, this is an important bill. Comparing to Ms. Sitho's subcommittee, hers was a much smaller one, only 2 or 3 members, and her approach was by and large neglected. And you should represent the Bills Committee and express the views of the Bills Committee on our behalf. Now, Deputy Chairman, in fact, I didn't know who the Deputy Chairman was. Mr. James Toh, I already explained the situation to him, and he also shared this view. So, can we ask the most experienced member of the Bills Committee to handle all the amendments in one go, rather than asking individual members to propose or move their own amendments? I wonder if this practice is all right. If the chair turns down the job, should the most experienced member move the amendments on behalf of the Bills Committee, or should individual members move them? Mr. Wong Ting Kwong, you have some comments. I ask the legal advisor to respond later. Can the legal advisor explain to us? Now, if Madam Chair, Ms. Sari Lee, is to move the amendment on behalf of the Bills Committee, and if her position clashes with the position of the Bills Committee, is there a problem with the law? No. Then perhaps, Madam Chair, you should consider moving the amendments on behalf of the Bills Committee. And after that, you can give your personal remarks in your personal capacity. I think this is a way out. Alternatively, as proposed by Mr. James Tien, out of the members who have proposed CSAs, we can ask one of them to move all the amendments from members in one go. The third option, which I find more desirable, is this. Members proposing CSAs should move their own CSAs so that they have ample time to move their amendments as well as express their views, so that they have ample time to discuss it thoroughly and explain their views during the second and third reading. Mr. Paul Chair, you also have some views. I don't think there's a problem with Mr. Wong Ting Kwong's question because, for example, I moved a resolution during the express rail link, and ultimately I wasn't being psychotic, but I vetoed my own amendment. So the amendment can be moved by the same person, and is up to that member to decide how to vote. In fact, you're just a trustee, and Madam Chair, you can move on the behalf of the Bills Committee. You don't have to state your stance. Legal advisor, would you like to respond to Mr. James Tian's question?
My understanding is that the Bills Committee can decide on which member can act on behalf of the Bills Committee in moving the amendment, and if there are more than one members wishing to do so, that's okay too. So my understanding is that there is no rule on who should be moving the amendment. In fact, I don't mind doing the moving, but then according to what I just said, well, for controversial subjects, there were precedents as to what needs to be done. And if you ask me what's the most desirable way out, I think it's the best for those who would like to move the amendments, then they should be moving the amendment on behalf of the Bills Committee. But then if you think otherwise, we can also give it further thoughts. I think, Mr. Abraham Sheikh, you can act on behalf of the Bills Committee in moving the amendment. Madam Chair, please do not play politics. I've already made it clear. That's, I've already explained why that should be done. I think you're playing politics again. So I'm just being honest and direct. So as the chairperson, if you're not able to represent the Bills Committee, and if this is passed by the Bills Committee, then why should you be bothered to run for the chairmanship? Well, please allow me to speak, because I've been very tolerating just now. I've allowed you to speak. Well, for individual member to move on behalf of the Bills Committee any amendment, that would not change the fact that this is an amendment moved by the Bills Committee. So we have to set that out very clearly. That's why I'm not going to say that you will not be allowed to vote on this because of different reasons, but then I'll go back and think about it. I personally do not have very strong views about this, but then the rules of procedure did say this. And as I said, I've already explained to you beforehand, I have my own stance, but then my vote might not be the same as that of the Bills Committee, and that might not be the most desirable way of handling it. Mr. James Tian, I'm pleased to hear that you are prepared to think about it again. I think that's the best way out. And if that is the previous mechanism, but then the way you put it, you said that you cited a particular reason for not doing this on behalf of the Bills Committee, then there is no need for the chairman to represent any Bills Committee in moving any amendment in the future. If that is the case, then the chair can always say that he or she has his or her own views, and I think what you just said is okay. I think there are three choices. Number one, you would make it clear that you're just moving this on behalf of the Bills Committee. It has nothing to do with your personal stance. I think last time Ms. Sito also did this. But then if you put it so strongly before me, then I have promised you that I'll think about it again. All right, please think about it and then let us know what needs to be done. All right. All right, for other outstanding issues. All right, issues raised at the meeting held on the 3rd of December, mainly by Mr. James To. Well, also on the 20th of December, concerns raised by members, the administration has already given a written reply. So, Mr. Chef, we haven't discussed some papers, two papers, CB bracket 1623, bracket 01, and also bracket 03. So, Administration, over to you, please. Thank you, Madam Chair. Can I refer to the later paper? That is the issues raised at the meeting held on the 20th of December. It's asked by Mr. Kenneth Leung. Again, it's about minors. In fact, in paragraph 3, we have also explained that under the immigration ordinance, for the minor who's born outside Hong Kong, then how can he become a permanent resident of Hong Kong? We have tried to explain that. But then it's no longer that meaningful now, because we have already stated that we would be prepared to accept the proposal by Mrs. Regina Ip and would be moving an amendment so that all minors will no longer be able to enjoy this exemption. So for the earlier concern, because Mr. Leung would like to clarify as to how many minors there are who might become permanent residents of Hong Kong, and as a result they might be able to enjoy the exemption. But now the most important point about this is no longer there, because we have accepted the proposal by Mrs. Regina Ip, so much so that all minors will be treated on the same footing, and there will be no exemption whatsoever. Which paper? CB bracket 1, 623/1314, bracket 03. That's the administration's response to the issues raised at the meeting held on the 20th of December. Because this is more relevant, that's why I talk about this first. Any question on this, Mr. Tian? Madam Chair, many members are of the view that if the administration were to introduce these cooling measures, well, the most important thing is we would like to stabilize our property prices, and for the exemptions proposed by most members, they are actually trying to taper off the cooling measures. But then what is being done now will be actually making them more harsh, because in the past the administration said that for the permanent residents who are minors, they will be able to enjoy this exemption. But then with this amendment, then even if they are HKPRs, they will no longer be able to enjoy this. So do you think that so are you actually trying to introduce more cooling measures as a result of what you have found out? Yes, we are actually tightening up the arrangement so that for raw minors, we are actually taking away the exemption. That's why, in that sense, we are tightening up the requirement. It's not that we have changed our stance, because for several meetings of the Bills Committee, many members have said that this might create a loophole in the law. And we have also thought about this. How are we going to plug this loophole? And we have also taken into account the fact that for minors, given the fact that their financial situation, as said by some members, would most likely have to rely on their parents or guardians, because they have to be taken care of by their parents or guardians. Most of them will be living with their parents or guardians, and therefore their need to purchase their own homes would be less urgent. That's why, after considering this point, we have decided to accept the proposal by members. But then we do not think that amongst adults there should be differential treatment. That's why we have decided to go for this. And for this reason, we believe that that is more acceptable. That's why we have decided to accept Mrs. Regina Ip's proposal. All right, this is palatable to most people's ears. But then how come the administration, it did not dawn on the administration that this should have been the approach in the first place? Yes, Ms. Wong. I think, as we have said, well, we hope that all permanent residents of Hong Kong, if they have a need to purchase their own homes, then we'd like to offer them this exemption. But then precisely because we have taken on board members' views, and we believe that this might create a major loophole, and therefore we have decided to tighten it up, and that's not against our principle. That is, only those permanent residents of Hong Kong who have the need to purchase their own homes would be granted the exemption. So it's not that we have not considered this very seriously. We have considered all aspects before we have come to this decision. Yes, Paul Chair. Madam Chair, apparently the administration's position is that you're actually attacking us with our wrong arguments. All right, initially when I proposed this exemption, I've told you that we should not be complacent about this. This could be a bomb, and we could be hurt by it ourselves. Now, the administration is saying that if the administration is not able to draw a line between those above 18 years old and those below, that's precisely the argument put forth by the administration, and the administration is now taking it back because that might create a loophole. I also understand this because I was one of those who suggested that this might create a loophole. But then, can you provide us with a legal argument? How come initially you said that you could not draw a line there, and now why you have changed your stance? Ms. Wong? Thank you, Chairman. Well, in fact, within the Bills Committee, many members have put forth different arguments, one of which is that for minors, relatively speaking, the need for them to purchase their own home for their own use. So we are talking about people's need to buy their own homes. So when compared to other permanent residents, the need would be somewhat less urgent, because for minors, most of them will have to rely on their parents or guardians for a living and so on. Whether or not it would constitute discrimination, it depends on whether or not the objective that we try to achieve is a reasonable one. So given the fact that we agree with what some members said, there is a possibility that this might create a loophole, and of course we do not want to see any loophole existing in the law. And for this exemption, if it comes to children or type 2 children, then there is indeed a chance that this might create a loophole, and also the need for such people to buy their own homes would be relatively lower, and therefore we are prepared to accept the proposal by Mrs. Regina Ip so that we can tighten it up further. So we have weighed all the factors before we have come to this conclusion. It's not that we have changed our stance casually. So in fact, we'd like to plug the loophole, and also after we have taken away this exemption, would it mean that for the minors, they are not able to buy their own homes? Well, for their housing need, we have not underestimated that, because they are basically living with their parents. As to how much need they have in buying their own homes, we believe that that is relatively low. That's why, after weighing all the factors, we have come to this decision. Mr. Paul Chair, I think the Deputy Secretary has demonstrated to us that they can always double talk. Because initially, if you listen back to what you said in reply to our questions, I'm sure you would not have been so forthcoming in saying this, because you said that your legal advice told you that you should not be discriminating against those under the age of 18 who are also permanent residents. And now, without any substantial change in the situation, you are now changing your stance, and you've also not come up with a reasonable legal argument to justify your change. It shows that the administration has been very haphazard or casual in deciding on this. So you should have known this in the first place. How come you are now changing it? How come you're overturning what you said before? So can you tell us your legal advice before and after? All right, Mr. Chair, I hope that you would understand this. Many members of this Bills Committee do have very strong views about this, and they have made a very strong request for the administration to plug the loophole. Whether or not you call it an about turn, or that they are actually taking heed of members' advice, is a matter of perspective. I think there needs to be some changes in the reality. In fact, there has been no change whatsoever to justify this change, and therefore I would not be able to do it unless there are good reasons. All right, Deputy Secretary, over to you, please. Thank you, Madam Chair. I think initially we try to be as lenient as possible, so that we hope that all permanent residents will be able to enjoy this exemption. But then, after taking on board the very strong views expressed by members, it's not just members from a particular political party, it's the views expressed by members of different political affiliations. They are very worried about this possible major loophole, including Paul Chair. That's why we had to consider it very carefully. Is there a way to plug the loophole? And also, we try to be more relaxed, and we are actually trying to tighten it up, and that's not against our principle. And also for the minors who might need to purchase their own homes, we have also got to consider it. So it's a very important consideration. But then after weighing all factors, and also in order to show that we are willing to take on board members' views wherever possible, so we are doing this from that perspective. And that's why we say that we are prepared to accept your proposal. So it's not that we have made this about turn all of a sudden. we could have done that the first time that you proposed it. In fact, we have taken a lot of time to think about it. We have weighed all factors from both sides, and in the end, we decided to accept your proposal. Mr. Abraham Sheck, Mr. Paul Chair, just a very brief point. All right, that shows what the administration is prepared to do. Whatever is palatable to the ear will be considered. And for those arguments that they do not like, then they would always refuse it. Mr. Abraham Sheck, they do not just double talk, they can multiple talk. So I think you could have answered the question on their behalf. I think you made a very good point. Well, we refer to the loopholes, and they show that you have not really thought through all the issues in coming up with the bill. So I'd just like to refer to a document, Madam Chair. All right. Mr. Paul Chair made certain remarks just now. How can they justify doing this? All right, they also refer to the legal advice they obtained earlier. And if you look at what they said today, then you can see how ugly the administration has been. All right, different political parties and members have told you this. And Madam Chair, you've also said very much the same. Why have you been so selective in taking on board members' advice? All right, Mr. Kenneth Leung also made a very good point. Well, for permanent residents below 18, they will have to take Hong Kong as their permanent home before they would be eligible. We are talking about type 2 children, and their parents are not HKPR. That's why I'm requesting that we should refer to the explanations given by the Deputy Secretary on different occasions as to why they were not prepared to grant the exemption, why they had to grant the exemption to the minors and so on. And when compared to the argument that they put forth this time, I think we can compare that. So I'd like to buy a newspaper to show how the officials go about their business, and that would also allow Hong Kong permanent residents to buy their own homes using their own names.
Well, Mr. Check, you know all our meetings are public. And I ask for all the records. All the papers are available online. Madam Chair, I have the right to ask for the retrieval of documents. Yes, can you prepare them? Madam Chair, we think we can adopt Mrs. Regina Ip's CSA, because if you refer yourself to CB bracket 1623/1314 bracket 04, we have already stated the justifications. So I would urge members to refer to the to the paper. I'm sorry, Madam Chair, I forgot to declare my interest. I am engaged in the property market as well. Well, the administration just talked about the major loophole, and that is why they have put forward this idea. Well, last time I mentioned an even bigger loophole. That is, any Hong Kong permanent resident can own a BVI company, and under that BVI company, a Hong Kong company can be set up to have property transactions without paying tax. This is a big loophole. Why isn't the administration dealing with it? Yes, I think as we discussed last time at this committee, this BVI company can hold another company which can then carry out a property transaction. This is, in fact, falling outside the scope of this bill. Well, in fact, any company held by the BVI company would be required to pay stamp duty. Of course, there are always some people who would like to outsmart the law, but if you're talking about the operation of companies, this is, I'm afraid, beyond the scope of this bill, and we explained it last time. Now, then does the administration agree that they cannot plug this loophole at all? And because we are talking about another level. Now, there are many investors are, in fact, carrying out property transactions under the name of companies held by a BVI company. This is nothing new. I've seen it for 2 to 3 decades. If you say that this bill cannot cater or cannot address this problem, then any person can make use of this loophole. Any minor can be a beneficiary of that company, so that through the procedures I mentioned, the property transactions can be carried out. Now, you said that this bill is not under the purview of your bureau or outside the scope of this bill. Then would the administration please admit that they cannot plug this loophole? In the past, many properties have been held by BVI companies in the manners I mentioned. If we're talking about some 4 million, I think many professional investors would resort to this method comparing to ordinary investors. So would the administration admit that in fact this problem cannot be addressed, that it remains a big loophole? Yes. Well, I can only supplement this. Mr. Tian, in fact, has brought up another issue. There are ways to circumvent the BSD by the use of companies, and that is why no exemption can be granted to companies. This is exactly the reason. Well, Mr. Tian, we have been scrutinizing the bill for quite some time. It is in reality impossible to plug all loopholes, and the administration has tried its best to float this bill. I think we have to agree to disagree, Mr. Abraham Check. Well, Madam Chair, it just shows that the administration hasn't read my CSA. My CSA, in fact, addresses all the issues raised by Mr. James Tian. If the administration is really minded to resolve this problem, you should accept my CSA. Anything to supplement? Yes, and nothing to supplement. Well, I can feel that some of the members are quite angry because they have devoted their effort in preparing amendments. But the administration is of the view that if these amendments are incorporated, the market might get the wrong message. That's how I view it. And we still have another paper. Administration, over to you. Thank you, Madam Chair. This is to respond to some technical issues raised at the meeting on the 3rd of December. That is in relation to closely related persons. Now, Mr. James To asked whether the scope of closely related persons can be further expanded. Now, the explanation is that if the closely related person is a non-Hong Kong PR, we have an arrangement, and the definition is that the person should be a parent, spouse, or child, or sibling. And if this is the arrangement adopted for the existing SSD, if this is further expanded, there might be loopholes which are undesirable, and this definition is also or has also been adopted for the existing special stamp duty regime, and we have no plan to change this arrangement. On replacement property, we explained a number of times before that if possession has to be taken of any building for public purpose, for redevelopment, for example, we would like to take a more relaxed approach. And that is why we have not imposed any restriction on the size or value of the replacement property or when the transaction should be carried out. That is because we would like to give flexibility to owners who are required to have replacement property for public purpose. And in fact, so far we have not imposed any size or value restrictions or when the or any restriction on time frame. And there is in fact no objective basis relating to these matters. And about adverse possession, since those claims will be handled by the court, and if the court rules that the claim is substantiated, then the no BSD will be charged. And another point is on trustee or guardian for minor, and in fact we addressed the point already. On small houses and redevelopment of small houses or the partial redevelopment, say for example the several top floors. Now the BSD mechanism or refund mechanism mainly serves to facilitate redevelopment activities in the market, which usually result in net gain. If rebuilding only involves the top 3 floors of the building, first of all, this is not a common kind of redevelopment, and the flat gain should also be limited. For small houses, they come under another set of regulations, and redevelopment of such houses will not result in any flat gain in general, and the redevelopment parameters are not the same as those for ordinary buildings. So for these two issues, we are not prepared to have any BSD refund for these two types of development. Any views, Mr. Abraham Sheck? I have a request. I hope the administration can give us legal advice about the CFA's ruling on the 7-year residence requirement for CSSA. There are 4 types of permanent residents. So I'd like to see their view, seek their views on whether it's constitutionally feasible. I ask for a paper from the administration. Yes. I think Mr. Shecht has asked a number of times, and we have replied a number of times before, whether this is contrary to Basic Law Article 25. And we have in fact included this answer in several of our papers. The CFA's ruling has to do with Basic Law Article 25, that is, everyone is equal before the law. And in our previous responses, we already mentioned that we need to consider whether there is any legitimate aim in introducing measures, whether these aims are fulfilled, and also the point on proportionality, and that is whether the measures are proportionate to the aims we'd like to achieve. Now, for the BSDs, the aim is to stabilize the market and to address local housing needs in property ownership, and also we are not banning non-Hong Kong PR buyers from buying properties. What we do is to charge them BSD, and our legal advice received is that it's in compliance with Article 25. But before that, we didn't have the CFA ruling. When the administration responded to the CSSA issue in the past, they have been using the same kind of reasoning. And the administration is replying to me for the 30th time. Oh, not exactly the 30th, but the 3rd time. I ask whether it's contravening the basic law. So I'd like to see a judicial review against the government, because this is not a simple matter. This is a major intervention of Hong Kong people's rights. Mr. Paul Chair. In fact, for Ms. Hong, in the CFA ruling, the CFA made some observations on Basic Law Article 25, although this is not the stare decisis. And the administration changes its position very easily. So we need to understand whether the CFA's ruling has brought about any new ideas on Article 25. This is a major point. We need to consider whether there are any implications. Secondly, I'd like to respond to the issue raised by Mr. James Toh. Well, I am not sure about his original intention, but according to the administration's explanation, exemption will, as far as parents-in-laws are concerned, no exemption will be given. Is my understanding correct? Because according to the administration, it seems there are only two aspects. First, this is the existing arrangement for special stamp duty, and it should remain unchanged. But if changes are to be made, it should be made in one go. And also for non-Hong Kong PRs, if they jointly acquire properties with Hong Kong PR, they would be get the exemption. But is my understanding correct? Whether it's father or mother-in-law, if their ties are recognized by law, I don't understand why exemption can't be given to those in-laws. And the administration's explanation is not satisfactory enough.
I think that's the same as what you said last time. But then Paul Chair is saying that if it's not appropriate, then you should change it. Or as I think it's very commonplace, because sometimes you say that having a daughter is better than having a son, because your daughter will bring in your son-in-law, and that might be better. Then why can somebody buy a property together with his or her in-laws? Well, if I remember it correctly, even though I was not in that position, well, for brothers or siblings, there's no exemption under the definition of a closely related person. But then after a very long argument with members, we have now broadened that so that for siblings they were also covered. But then what we think of is, it's not about whether or not they live together. It's about them buying a property together. So we are talking about the relationship within a nuclear family. Because if you broaden it too far, then we are concerned that that might create a loophole. Because you cited an example that is for a couple living together with their father-in-law, and now we have already included siblings. So for a couple, husband and wife, and if it's the brother of the husband and then the sister of the wife, and if they buy a flat together, then that would also be allowed, so that they would be able to enjoy the exemption. But then for the elder brother and the younger sister, their relationship could be very distant, so they might not have met one another before and after the couple got married. So do we really want to do that? So it's a balancing act. So under the existing arrangement, we have already covered parents, spouses, children, siblings, and so on. If we broaden it further, then we are concerned that people might be able to circumvent the law by taking advantage of this. So it's a balancing act. That's why we are suggesting that, well, other than the fact that under the SSD, which is already in operation, we also do not want to extend this definition of closely related person to too broad a scope, so much so that there is a chance that it could create a loophole. So this is a balancing act. Thank you. well, members might not be happy with this. All right, my understanding is that the administration is not willing to relax it further. But then last time, you also agreed to broaden the exemption to cover siblings. So similarly, in terms of striking a balance, I understand that the stance of the administration, but then there is also a need for the mother-in-law or the father-in-law. So for the in-laws, or in some cases, they're actually closer than the next of kin. So you will have to consider this further so that you can relax it a bit further, so that for these people, they would not be lamenting because they will not be able to get the exemption. Yes, there are different circumstances, and in the case referred to by Mr. Chair, all right, you don't necessarily have to have the 3 people buying the property together. In fact, the wife and her mother can buy a property jointly. But then if you insist on having the 3 people buying a property together, then there is no way that we can grant the exemption, and there is no way that we can cover all the circumstances or scenarios. Yes, the honourable member mentioned a situation. I also refer to this, and there are also cases in which people could take advantage of this, and 2 remotely related people can also take advantage of this in buying a property together so that it can circumvent the duty. So we try to adopt a middle-of-the-road approach and strike a balance between all the factors. All right? Secretary, have we covered all the papers? Legal advisor, any follow-up questions on the bill? So I'd also like to invite the legal advisor to help us. All right, for the text that we have referred to in our clause-by-clause examination, please also check it against the English version. And technically, if you have any observation, then please do draw our attention to those issues. All right, the legal advisor has also made some suggestions on some technical aspects. So, are you going to move further CSAs other than the one proposed by Mrs. Regina Ip? You would be moving that as the administration CSA. So will you be coming back again and then do another clause-by-clause examination with us? Yes, as we have stated that we have accepted the proposal by Mrs. Regina Ip, we also need to look at the wording proposed by Mrs. Ip to see if it's feasible, so we'll be formally submitting our version. And also for the technical CSAs that we mentioned, we'll try to work that out with the legal advisor, and we would also be looking at some of the wording so that there might be some textual amendments. And also for the Law Society, well, previously we also said that for the administration CSA, in response to the Law Society's proposal, for example, for the buyer, because of some misrepresentation, all right, for example, if he claims to be an HKPL and it is subsequently is found out that he is not a permanent resident, then the innocent vendor would not be able to adduce this as evidence in court. So we initially thought that we should accept the Law Society's proposal, but then in the light of our further amendment, the Law Society has come up with further proposal for amendment. So we'll look at that and then we'll come up with the amendments together. So these are some of the outstanding issues that we have to work on. I think the time is tight, as the policy address and also the budget will be announced shortly. So if you can table your CSA at the next meeting, and if we can scrutinize those clause by clause, then there is a chance that we can finish our work in time. Yes, we'll do our best. Okay, Mr. James Tian. Well, Madam Chair, well, the next meeting will be close to the Chinese New Year. So I'd like to know a bit more. So what's the administration's proposal? So are you going to accept Mrs. Regina Ip's proposal? And you also refer to some of the minor amendments that you refer to. And on top of that, there are no further amendments. So whether or not I'll be available doesn't really matter. So would you be accepting more proposals closer to the time? In fact, the next meeting will be held next Friday on the 10th. But then would they be ready before the 10th? With regard to all the CSAs, can you respond to that? And also, Mr. James Tian also asked this, that is, other than Mrs. Regina Ip's proposal, how about other proposals? You had been rather firm on your stance. So how about the others? Will you be changing your mind? Or for the time being, we are only prepared to accept the proposal by Mrs. Regina Ip. For the others, we are not going to accept them. All right, I'll be around on the 10th, but then I was concerned that they might need another meeting after the 10th. Okay, so for the technical amendments, will they be available before the 10th? Or else there is no point in having that meeting on the 10th. Yes, we'll try our best because the legal advisor just talked to us and he also came up with some suggestions on the wording, so we'll have to think about that. So before the 10th, we hope to be able to submit all the CSAs. All right, no further comment. Okay, date of next meeting, 10th of January, 10:45. So time is, we are pressed for time, so please do understand that. All right, meeting is now adjourned.